Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All right, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast. This is On Trial, and tonight I'm playing the role of the defense in our discussion, our plea bargain edition of David Lynch's 1984 Dune, an adaptation of Frank Herbert's work of the same name. And we're doing this because Denis Villeneuve's Dune is day and date this week now on Thursday, and I'm sure by the time this is done broadcasting, it'll be Wednesday, and then by tomorrow it'll be Tuesday. Anyway, comes out this week, day and date on HBO Max and in theaters. And so here to prosecute David Lynch's Nutty Dune is everyone's favorite guest on the podcast, David Wright. So Loki, how you doing, sir?
Yes, I have been immortalized on the soundboard. I feel quite honored. This.
That's right.
I have a legacy now. It's great.
That's right. Here we go.
So Loki. Nice.
There it is.
Yeah. So I am not Sean Comer. He is Sean Comer. I'm not.
That's what you did
yes,
there.
I will be. Yeah, I will be prosecuting today.
All right. So let's jump into this. You had contacted me when I threw this up on the schedule, and I threw it up as soon as I knew they were doing a new Dune movie. Sorry. As soon as I found out they were doing a new Dune movie, I was like, okay, we got to look at the old 1984 one. I have not seen this thing since I was a kid. I barely remembered any of it. I knew Patrick Stewart was in it, and there were worms, and that was about all I could remember. In 1984, I'm 8. So this movie...
I'm actually quite impressed you remembered that. Most people just remember Sting in a thong.
Well, now that you mention it. But my point is, this is not one of those things that stuck with me, and it had no rewatchability for me as a kid. So I saw it. My dad had it on VHS, and he taped off of HBO or something. And I may have watched it once, just wanting to know what it was, and then I never picked it up again. But you were very excited about this, and I'm on all the things Dune related. I'm like, well, there's 2, so calm your tits. But you're here. When did you first see this? How old were you, and what did you think of it the first time you saw it?
Oh boy, I can't remember what age, but I might have been in the single digits.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe close to double digits at the time. But yeah, I was a kid, let's say, not a teenager, and I think it was on TV, and my dad was watching it, and yeah, I just sat there and watched it with him, and I was intrigued. It helped out a lot that my dad was familiar with the book, so he was able to kind of explain, to me, everything that was going on. This is the Bene Gesserit, this is what they do, this is the Spacing Guild, and this is how they work, and to kind of fill in a lot of the details, which we'll get into later when we
having
get
an audio track, your own personal audio track there.
Yeah, that wasn't whispering, but we'll get to that. And yeah, I got to the end of the movie, and well, that was kind of interesting. And a few years later, we were at my grandparents' place. We go there went there for vacation a lot of the time. We were in Alberta and they were in BC, which is a much better place to go for vacation. So I was looking for a book to read there because, we didn't have my computer, so no video games. And so I brought Dune from my dad's old book collection, and I read that, and it was great. I loved the book so much. I probably rated it as the second best book I've ever read.
Wow.
First being Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I am a nerd. Yeah. Yeah, don't panic.
So long and thanks for all the fish.
Yes. Yeah, mostly harmless.
That's right.
Yeah, Life, the Universe, and Everything. Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Okay, I think we've gone through all the book titles now. Okay, and another thing. But yeah, so I read the book, and just after that, I was like, oh, well, I have to watch the movie again now after watching the book. So once we got home, I think we had it taped off of something somewhere. So I watched it again, and yeah, so it's a story that I really enjoy. I really like the whole hero was wronged at the start, and they think they've killed them, and then but in secret they survived, and you're just waiting for the moment at the end where the mask comes off, and it was me all along. I'm the author of all your pain.
I'm not playing the sound clip.
I did that for you, Mark, but
I appreciate that.
But yeah, I Count of Monte Cristo sort of style sort of thing. So yeah, and so like I was into that, and we've never really gotten a solid Dune adaptation.
Yeah,
we'll get into David Lynch in a bit.
Yeah, well, I kind of just want to ask a very general question. We don't have to get into specifics right now, but having read the book, what would you say the major difference between David Lynch's interpretation of Frank Herbert and the actual authentic source material is?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the first half of my prosecution. So if you like, we can just hop right in.
Hold that thought. All right. So
okay, sure.
Okay. So so this movie comes out, like I said, in 1984, December, as a matter of fact. It had a premiere at the Eisenhower Theater December 3rd, and then it debuted.
I was like 2 months.
Yeah. And it had its wide debut in the United States, December 14th. If I know there are sometimes I just read the plot because it's a little easier that way, and I don't miss details. If I didn't read the plot, I would not have any clue what was happening in this movie.
We'll get to that.
In the far future, the known universe is ruled by the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. The most valuable substance in the empire is the spice, a drug that extends life and expands consciousness. Funny thing about that is that's also what synthetic marijuana is called, and it messes you up.
Yeah.
I laughed every time they were like, the spice must flow and take you directly to jail. The spice also allows the Spacing Guild to fold space, permitting safe, instantaneous,
spoiler alert.
The Guild fears a conspiracy that could jeopardize spice production and sends an emissary to demand an explanation from the Emperor, who reveals his scheme to destroy House Atreides. The Emperor fears Duke Leto Atreides' growing popularity and a secret army he is reportedly amassing, threatening his rule. He plans to cede control planet Arrakis, the universe's only source of spice, to House Atreides. Once they are installed there, the Atreides will be ambushed by their arch enemies, the Harkonnens, with help from the Emperor's elite Sardaukar troops.
Yeah, Sardaukar. You're pretty close.
Okay, I tried.
Yeah.
Right,
that's good.
Everyone got all that because there's going to be a quiz later.
Yeah, we need to get that Rick Moranis thing from Spaceballs on the soundboard.
Everyone got that? Yeah, okay, I'll add that one. The Guild Navigator... I'm slowly but surely rebuilding my soundboard. The Guild Navigator commands the Emperor to kill Duke Leto's son, Paul Atreides, because the Guild fears he may somehow threaten spice production. The execution order draws the attention of Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, since Paul was tied to their centuries-long breeding program to produce Kwisatz Haderach.
The Kwisatz Haderach. You're doing pretty good. 9 out of 10.
The universe is super being. Thanks, teacher. Before Paul leaves for Arrakis, he is tested by Bene Gesserit's Reverend Mother Mohiam.
Yeah, Mohiam. I think that's how I always pronounced it in my mind, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
By being forced to endure excruciating pain. To Mohiam's surprise and eventual satisfaction, he passes the test. Like Flash Gordon, I tell you. On the industrial world of Gedi Prime, the sadistic Baron Vladimir Harkonnen tells his nephew Glossu the Beast Rabin and Fade Rathau about his plan. Okay, Mumra, whatever. His plan to eliminate House.
That would have been a very different movie.
I think that's Sting, isn't it? That's his character.
Yeah, Sting plays Fade Ratha. Yeah,
good. I'm calling him Sting from now on.
Sure.
Tells the Beast and Sting about his plan to eliminate House Atreides by manipulating someone in Duke's orbit to betray him. The Atreides leave their homeworld of Caladan for Arrakis, a barren desert planet populated by gigantic sandworms. The native people of Arrakis, the Freemen, prophesize that a Messiah, because it's always a Messiah, will lead them to freedom. Duncan, Idaho, sure. One of Leto's loyalists tells him that he suspects Dune holds vast numbers of Freemen who could prove to be powerful allies, as Freemen often are. Before Leto can form an alliance with the Freemen, the Harkonnens launch their attack. The Harkonnens traitor within House Atreides, Leto's personal physician, Dr. Wellington Yu, disables critical shields, leaving the Atreides nearly defenseless. Idaho is killed. Leto is captured, and nearly all of House Atreides is wiped out by the Harkonnens. Baron Harkonnen has Mentat Peter de Vries killed Dr. Yu with a poison blade. Leto dies in a failed attempt to assassinate Baron Harkonnen using a poison gas tube. Oh, I remember this. Implanted by Dr. Yu in exchange for sparing the lives of Lady Jessica, Leto's concubine, and Paul. Paul, that's a cat's name. Sorry. Paul and Jessica survive the attack and escape into the deep desert, where they are given sanctuary by Siege Freeman. Paul assumes the Freeman name
Muad'Dib.
Thank you. Frank assumes the Freeman name Mob Deep and emerges as the leader for whom the Freemen have been waiting. He teaches them to build and use weirding modules, sonic weapons developed by House Atreides, and target spice money. Over the next 2 years, spice production 5 years later, spice production is nearly halted. The Spacing Guild informs the Emperor of the deteriorating situation on Arrakis and demands he rectify it. Paul falls in love with Chani, a young Freeman warrior. Jessica becomes the Freeman's Reverend Mother by ingesting the water of life, because this movie didn't have enough shit in it. A deadly poison which she renders harmless by using her Bene Gesserit abilities. As an after effect of this ritual, Jessica's unborn child, Aaliyah, later emerges from the womb with full powers of an adult, and she joins the X-Men. In a prophetic dream, Paul learns of the plot by the Emperor and the Guild to kill him. He also sees that they fear he will consume the water of life. When Paul's dreams suddenly stop, he drinks the water of life and has a profound psychedelic trip like you do in the desert, like Homer Simpson. He gains powerful psychic powers and the ability to control the sandworms, which he realizes are the spice's source. The Emperor amasses a huge invasion fleet above Arrakis to wipe out the Freemen and regain control of the planet. He has Raban beheaded and summons Baron Harkonnen to explain why spice mining has stopped. Paul launches a final attack against the Harkonnens and the Emperor Salamander at Arrakeen, the capital city, riding atop sandworms and brandishing sonic weapons. Paul's Freeman warriors easily defeat the Emperor's legions. Paul's sister Aaliyah mortally wounds Baron Harkonnen, who is sucked through a breached palace wall and into the mouth of the sandworm. Paul confronts the defeated Emperor and fights Fade Ratha in a duel to the death. After killing Fade, Paul demonstrates his newfound powers and fulfills the Freeman prophecy by causing rain to fall on Arrakis. Aaliyah declares him to be the Kwisatz
Haderach.
Kwisatz Haderach. All righty. 5 hours later, we're finally done. All right, sir, kick us off here. What do you have to say about this movie?
Okay, well, as you probably noticed it from that summary, it's kind of weird and convoluted. Yeah, like that's a lot to get through. So, okay, so to begin with, like there are two principal ways that I would judge an adaptation. Mm-hmm. One, as an adaptation, like how well does it embody the source material? You know, the whole reason for it being made in the first place. And second, just how is it as a movie? Mm-hmm. You know, like if you have no idea what Dune is, you never read a page of the book, you're just going in there, how is it just as a movie? So starting off as an adaptation, like overall, like it is the story of Dune. Like it hits the major beats of the book decently. There certainly are details that have been changed. For example, for like the weirding modules, the sonic weapons, those are not in the book at all.
Okay.
Yeah, like the weirding way that they say it's a system of martial arts developed by the Bene Gesserit. Like the idea of the Bene Gesserit is they have such awareness of their bodies that they're able to manipulate them to like the cellular, almost atomic level. Okay. Like that's how Jessica can like make the water of life non-toxic for people to consume. She can choose the gender of her baby. You know, like Paul was supposed to be a girl originally, but because Duke Leto wanted a son, she changed it to him being a boy. That sort of thing. So the idea is that they have such great control over their bodies that they can basically do like super fast reflexive, fast moving, accurate martial arts that, you know, to a normal person, you know, like, you know, you would just totally demolish them. So that's the weirding way. And Jessica taught that to Paul, but yeah, that wasn't really a part of it in the story. So that's something they made up. They reveal the Spacing Guild far too soon. And for some reason, the navigator looks like a penis with a vagina mouth because David Lynch.
Yep.
You know, like first thing you see in the movie pretty much is a man on a throne being talked to by a giant penis with a vagina mouth. Like,
I mean, it looks kind of like a cockroach, but sure, penis with a vagina mouth also works.
yeah. And that's not quite how the navigators are supposed to look. They're more like kind of like fishmen. We would say like, big
Admiral
eyes,
Akbar.
webbed fingers. Yeah, a bit more like Admiral Akbar, but a bit less stocky.
Okay.
So that was sort of one big change that they didn't include in it. Like the characters of the Harkonnens was changed a massive amount. Like in the book, Baron Harkonnen is like this lethally intelligent and sadistic man, like the sort of person where if you get on his shit list, he will put a plan into motion that could take decades to come to fruition, but will completely destroy you. Like they got the expression like plans within plans. Like he's just this ruthless intellect. Whereas here he like screams and injects pus into his blisters and flies around screaming and showers it oil because David Lynch.
Can we just talk about that for a second? So
yes.
This guy in this fat guy in a suit with the blisters all over his face, and he's leaking oil and all this other stuff. Watching him float around the room, all I could think of is it's a little Wicked Witch of the West for me. I mean, like I don't understand how that shot. David Lynch is not an incompetent director.
Definitely not.
He's a weirdo, but I would say he's on the artsy, competent side of weirdo. And how did that shot survive editing? Like,
yeah,
how do you do a wide angle shot on that? And he's just wee, like he's just floating around like he's in a balloon.
Yeah, the Lynchian weirdness I find is more distracting in the context of this movie than helpful.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes away from a lot of what's going on. Like you can't take the Harkonnens seriously because they're just Saturday morning cartoon villains basically. Yeah. Whereas if you get into the book, like Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is a legitimate threat. This is a guy you do not want to go up against if you can avoid it.
Right.
And his family too. Like Raban's an idiot, but he's a brutal idiot. This is the guy you send in when you just want someone who will just go in, smash stuff, scare people, tell you that that Harkonnen means business. Yeah. He's almost like a New Hope era Darth Vader. He's the blunt instrument when you need the blunt instrument. Whereas
you don't get that impression in this movie. He kind of has a dumb expression on his face half the time. Like I thought Sting was the guy running the show.
Whereas Fade, by comparison, is much smarter. And I forget if this was in the Lynch movie. It's been a long time since I see it, but there is a bit where he tries to assassinate the Baron, and he fails, and the Baron is just Fade, what's going on, and he's just like, well, you let Raban run Arrakis, and he's a moron without me. And he was like, yeah, because Raban's an idiot, and he's just going to go there and oppress them. And then I will supplant Raban with you, and you can go as their benefit, their merciful benefit her, and they will love you, and you can rule them that much more effectively. You're thinking short term, Fade. You are my heir. I'm not going to hand the Harkonnen over to Raban. He's a moron. But when the time is right, you shall get what's yours, sort of thing. I forget how much that's stated in the show, but or in the Lynch movie. But the Harkonnen get a bad rub there. Those are kind of like the two biggest flaws in the film overall. And there's some smaller stuff like the whole Paul making it rain at the end. He didn't have superpowers over nature. That's not what the Kwisatz Haderach is. It's like they have the ability to see into the future, basically. For all the Bene Gesserit's ability to, through their eugenics, basically, and their mental training, there's just a place in their consciousness that they cannot go.
Obviously, this preceded the 90s X-Men, but I kept or 2000s X-Men. But in the suits. So I'm going to take a break from that reference and go to a different reference. So everyone's big complaint about the 2016 Ghostbusters was, other than the casting and everything about it, was the original Ghostbusters doesn't take that much time developing the technology. That's not what the movie was about. 2016 was absolutely a lot of it revolved around the developing and testing and playing with the technology. It very much was about let's build cool weapons to fight ghosts. which misses which is this I think is a good criticism, misses the point of Ghostbusters entirely.
Yeah.
To draw another comparison, like J.R.R. Tolkien's books are laden with a lot of in-depth, very in-depth minutia about language and the world itself and the customs and the cultures. And I think people have said like he spends like pages describing a chair and all this other stuff. When Peter Jackson adapted it to film, there's some of that. You have to include some of it for world building, but other than that, it's like let's get to the meat of the matter here. Let's go hunt some orc. Yeah. So,
my axe,
right. So, relating that back to Dune and thinking about the suits, first of all, like I said, I was getting, when they were wearing the black suits, I kept getting X-Men vibes. And then he gets superpowers. And I'm like, all right. Yeah. I understand this precedes that, but like it's weird how our culture just migrates in that direction, whether or not it wants to. It just does it very naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think like when... Oh, you go ahead.
Well, the overall point that I was getting to was how much time in this movie was spent on explaining, like, how the suits work and why they work, what they do, and what they're gonna like. We get it. There's no water on Arrakis. Like, let's just move on. Like I don't need a 20-minute explanation about how the suit works. And it's funny that David Lynch took that approach to this. Like, an adaptation is taking the source material and turning it into a stunning visual experience. You don't have to put every single word of the damn thing on the screen.
Yeah,
that's not how that works. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, in your chair example, like it might take 20 pages. You could take 20 pages to describe a chair in perfect detail in a book, but in a movie, you just build the chair and there it is, done.
Right.
Like it's like 1 second of information through your eyes. Like apparently, like the bit at the end where Paul makes it rain, that made Frank Herbert shoot through the roof when he saw that because.
Because like more experience where it's like,
well, it's
done to my story.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the worms. Water kills them. That's how you make the water of life. Is you drown an infant worm in water, and it secretes the water of life into that. So if you make it rain on Arrakis, you basically kill all the worms, which stops spice production, which then stops your interstellar travel. Like he's basically just destroyed all of human civilization by doing that flex move. So I mean, it looks dramatic and cool in the movie, but once you think about it, it's like, oh, wait a minute, they're screwed.
So I kept thinking about this, and I don't know if you have an answer to this, but my setup to it is there's an episode of Family Guy where Brian takes drugs and like he takes like ADHD medicine, and so he gets stimulated, he gets amped up, and so he creates this sci-fi world. He invents a language, like he's so like full of energy. He creates this entire world, language, everything else. Of course, it's like all derivative of everything, like the guy who created Game of Thrones. But
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah. So stuff like Dune usually is a metaphor for something else. Certainly Lord of the Rings was. Lord of the Rings was Tolkien dealing with World War I. And there's a part of me, like I said, because I don't know the answer to this question, I'm kind of conflicted. There's a part of me that truly believes Herbert Walker was trying to say something about something with Dune, that Dune is a metaphor for something. There's also a part of me that he's just Brian on meth in the basement, creating this bizarre world that only makes sense to him. Because when I tell you, like, and you say you love the book, and so that's kind of why I brought this up, how you can reconcile how in depth the information conveyed in the book is and what they try and how they try to do that in the film, because it completely lost me. It came a point in a tipping point in the movie where I was just watching it, but it might have well been a foreign film. I did not understand what was happening at all.
So this brings me into the second part of my critique is, so I've done sort of book to movie adaptation sort of thing. I mean, like changes were made, but it's not like a completely different film. This isn't like Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers where, hey, it's got the same title as the book, but other than that, it's pretty much its own thing.
Yeah, Starship Troopers in name only.
Yeah, I mean, it has that doesn't make it a bad movie. It just makes it a bad adaptation, right? You can watch Starship Troopers and enjoy it as,
I have things to say about Starship Troopers, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah, that's for another podcast. But anyway, so on to like, yeah. So if you're someone who is not familiar with the source material, yeah, the world that Frank Herbert made is so dense that cramming that all into even a 3-hour movie, it's too much. It just has to spend all its time explaining it and he just kind of chose to go with this whole just have everyone whisper all the exposition.
Oh my God! Yeah, finish what you were saying, but I have things to say about that. By the way, this thing is over. This thing is 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, and apparently there's like a 5-hour director's cut somewhere too. But yeah, I'm not gonna go with that.
That was a deep sigh from the guy that watched all 12 plus hours of the extended Lord of the Rings editions. Like, I can only do this so much.
Well, it's a testament to how great Lord of the Rings is that you watch Lord of the Rings and you want more Lord of the Rings. Like if Peter Jackson said, like, I'm going to go and I'm just going to put everything in a super 15-hour edition of Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil and everything, it's like, I'd be up for that.
Yeah, I would be having the experience that like most humans had with Avatar. I don't want to leave this world. Like you're just dragging your friend out of there. No, I don't want to go. Like we have to work tomorrow. This is not a real place.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a bit of a different thing. And like, sure, with Dune done right, you could get something like that where, I would like to see the story told in full with all the detail. But again, this is, movies. This is like before Lord of the Rings, so the whole multi-film epic Harry Potter thing. That was, these are those days before that in Hollywood where, you just made one movie, and if that did great, you were happy, right?
Right.
Kyle MacLachlan was not signed onto a 3-movie deal to play Paul Atreides, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But to his credit, I thought he did a good job.
They did not already have Dune licensing products in production before the movie was even finished.
Oh, geez, could you imagine the David Lynch's Dune toys? Like buy 5 action figures and we'll mail you a free hairless cat that you can milk.
Just thinking about I can't remember the villain's name, the fat villain. You like pull a cord and it just flies around the room.
Yes, yeah, it has a little like propeller on its top, and you pull the string and it flies off.
Kids are riding their worms down the street.
Yes. yeah, Power Wheels tie-in. That would be. But yeah, we digress. Yeah, this is.
Let me do it. Let me do it.
Okay. So Loki. Thanks. I'm here, right?
No, I have a button I can press.
Great. Okay, yeah, this is podcast with twice as much David. We're gonna have the lowest viewing numbers of anything on the network.
But when you think you've had enough David, more David.
Yeah. But anyway. The amount of exposition they cram into this film through just voiceovers, it's very clunky and very distracting, and even just like character thoughts that are blatantly obvious. They tried to take the life of my son. It's like, yes, he's your son. You're his dad. Like we understand that.
Yeah.
It kills the momentum, and it's just kind of awkward, especially because nothing else does that. Like I understand why Denis Villeneuve is splitting it into 2.
Everyone makes the "did I leave the iron on" face.
Yeah. I'm thinking.
Yeah. So like the direction they get from David Lynch is you need to, be pensive in this. We need to read this emotion off of you. Okay, but is there any dialogue? No, all the dialogue will be 80 yards later. So everyone's kind of just doing poop face. Yeah. That's like, and you're right. It breaks up the structure of the movie. It breaks up the pace of I couldn't remember the word pace. It breaks up the pace of the movie a lot to where it's like there's a lot of. I can't believe a lot of this survived editing because there's a lot of just the camera focusing on someone's face. Yeah. And then 80-yard dialogue that's supposed to be their thought.
Yeah. And then you add in all the kind of the weird Lynchian stuff, like Twofer having to like milk the cat to get the antidote to the poison the Baron's given him. Like I'm pretty sure in the book, like he was captured by the Harkonnen and pressed into their service. But I think it was just like, look, you just have to show up every day and someone will give you the antidote, like in liquid drinking form. You don't have to milk a hairless cat in a box because.
Can you imagine? They're just watching dailies and it's like, so David, I understand why you think the hairless cat milking needs to be there, but does it? And David Lynch is like, yeah. No. There's no Dune without a milking hairless cat. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay.
Yeah,
You do know this is going to an American audience in 84, right?
You're like, hey, you guys came to me. Like, have you not seen Twin Peaks? Or Eraserhead, or I'm not all that up on David Lynch's filmography, but
I want to say the last thing I saw by David Lynch was Dark Highway, which is an experience, let me tell you.
Yeah. So yeah, from that perspective, there's just those kind of like weird production decisions that just kind of make you like, what's with the cat, or what's with all the gimp suits?
Right.
This does not look like Star Wars, despite it being made post Star Wars.
Well, I wonder how much of that played into the decision. Star Wars has wreaked such havoc on the film industry, good, bad, or indifferent, and how much of like Star Trek the Motion Picture, Dune, so much got made because of Star Wars that would not have gotten made otherwise.
Yeah. Well, when you think of like the technological jump in effects at that time, you look at pre-Star Wars and post-Star Wars.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about that. Like they could have gone Plan 9 from outer space with it. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to me. There was anxiety about making something as otherworldly as a Dune, just because like, how does the average person connect to this? I mean, books are not movies, movies are not books, and these things are made for mass audiences. So you're going to dump all $40 million into a movie. It better be accessible to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that might go to the movies. And I don't know about you, and I don't want to take away your love of the book, but can you honestly say that at first blush the book is relatable to most people?
Well, I mean, like as far as like day-to-day life, no, of course not. It's about like a prince in space,
right?
In like the year 3000. But like like the people are still humans in this story.
Sure.
It's a different society, but in the end, like a lot of the themes are relatable to the people at the time. Like my father's been murdered, I have to avenge my family.
Sure, that's relatable.
The court drama. And if anything, like with Dune, I think to get the themes, you have to kind of like go beyond the first book. You have to sort of see where things go down the line, because in the end, it actually becomes more of, I think it's Herbert's intention was like to be sort of like a cautionary tale about charismatic leaders. Because
like theme this week.
Yeah.
So, let me rephrase it this way, because I might not be making myself clear. In the 40 years that have passed ish, since Star Wars and Dune, I'm averaging here. You and I have lived in a time where science fiction and science fantasy are A, interchangeable, and B, have become part of mass media culture. Now, if you want to pick, obviously, because they're doing it, this Friday on HBO Max and the theaters, they're doing Dune. Like we get so much science fiction and science fantasy now, it's become commonplace to the point where some people are complaining there's nothing else in the theaters besides this nonsense. But before Star Wars, we didn't live in that world, and I think that, and I have actually read that there were a lot of studio producers and executives that were like, you can't do science fiction for a mass media audience. That was the big problem with Star Wars. Like George Lucas took that around, and nobody wanted to make it because, like, who the fuck's going to see this thing? The science fiction world now is broad and expansive, and it has all of its niches and fandoms and conventions and whatnot. It wasn't like that in the 70s. The science fiction people were a very small sub niche group of people that were kind of outside of mainstream society. And so imagine that elevator pitch. Hi, I'm David Lynch. I'm taking this to whatever studio this was.
I think it was Dino De Laurentiis did it.
Okay. And it was like, I'd like to pitch a movie that that appeals to a very small fraction of people out there. Science fiction nerds. What, the people who read Heinlein? Yes. And Isaac Asimov? Yes. Fuck off. This thing's not going to make money. Then Star Wars happens. And then they're tripping over their dick to get stuff like this made. And so here we are, tripping over our dicks, Dune.
Yeah. Like, I don't think this was one of Lynch's passion projects. I think this was more of a work for hire.
Sure.
Sort of thing. You get some directors where like this is what I want to do. Like with Jodorowsky's Dune, he really wanted to make his take on Dune. He just had everything he needed except for money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting film if they had ever made that. Oh boy. Like Salvador Dali signed on to play the Padishah Emperor, and he had it like written into his contract that he would only do it if the throne he sat on could double as a toilet.
Nice.
I am not making that up.
I want to see this movie. Can we go back in time and give him the money?
Yeah, sadly, all we have is a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune, which sort of goes into the background, the concept art, and like all the prep work he's done. But like they actually had H.R. Giger to like do all the art for the Harkonnen. Like, could you imagine what that would have been like? That
yeah.
I mean, it was equal parts crazy as brilliance from what I've gathered, but.
It's so funny, and I don't want to keep like sort of lamenting the state of modern film, but you think about how many creative people in film from the 70s and the early 80s there were. You just name dropped like H.R. Giger, and you have David Lynch here, and just like at that time, like they're not considered that anymore, but like Spielberg and Lucas and all of these people were just such fucking weirdos.
Yeah, well, you gotta have to find that. Yeah, you need to just have that right mix of eccentricity to talent that they actually pull things off. And sometimes you even need someone else added in to just sort of keep them on a leash before they just run roughshod over everything.
Want this whole area to look like vaginas. I see what you're saying, but what if we also made it not offensive?
Yeah,
and then you have the alien set.
Yeah, and then you sort of have the opposite part where it's just like all movie designed by committee. It's just nothing but producers' notes, and made by a director who's just like, I'll do whatever you say for a paycheck. And
that's how you end up with that's how you end up with the Inhumans television show.
Yeah, stuff like that where it goes up and down. Like the MCU, I think they've found a decent balance between creative freedom and oversight. I know some people would disagree with that, but it depends project to project. But they got something that works for them. But to get back to your point about the rise of sci-fi movies, I mean it kind of goes in waves. Like yes, after Star Wars, it was like we'll greenlight everything that's remotely like Star Wars because we want to cash in on Star Wars. And you sort of see that look like with Harry Potter. Right, Harry Potter was a big thing, and now it's Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Who knew about Percy Jackson and the Olympians before they made the movie? It's just same with Hunger Games.
What else you got? Culture
Twilight. Okay, teen paranormal romance. What have other people written? Okay, just make it cash it in before the fad goes away. Hunger Games comes out. Okay, YA dystopia fantasy novels. Maze Runner, Scorched Trials, Divergent.
I hear those Marvel comic movies do well. What other comics are out there? Well, have you heard of The Watchmen? Yeah, I know it's not the order.
Watchmen was first, but have you heard of the guy that made The Watchmen?
Right. Have you heard of the series called Preacher? Anyway, not all comics are the same as my point.
Yeah, so that and towards like the late 90s, early 2000s, there was like a drought of science fiction, I would say. Like what science fiction was made, it wasn't space operas or Star Trek or anything like that. It was like more smaller, high concept.
Things keep bombing. They spent $40. I'm not doing a whole money segment here. This is on trial, but like they spent 40 to 42 million on this, in 1984, and this thing barely made its budget, times one, let alone times two.
Yeah.
And the history of 80s sci-fi failures is long and interesting. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, it takes a while for the momentum to shift in the industry. Yeah, like you imagine, like when these things were being made, they were still making lots of money, but by the time they come out, then it's sort of past, or the movies just aren't that good.
Right.
But it just takes one person to like break the mold, like. Cutthroat Island bombed, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was like, pirates never make money. Let's not do a pirates movie. But then, Pirates of the Caribbean comes out, despite his best efforts, and it just blows up the box office. It makes tons of money, and who knows when they'll stop making those films, despite Johnny Depp's best efforts. Yeah, and just sort of my last point here.
Okay.
And what we have to factor in nowadays is. The streaming wars have made niche properties so much more appealing. Like, that's why we're now getting a lot of these more obscure works being adapted.
Right.
is like they're just so desperate to put as much content out there, and so sure, this might not be the most popular thing in the general public, but the book sold enough copies to make it worth an investment, and we can we can just
said
get
it's a long tail of entertainment now, where you're not siloing things into a few projects, but you're making a zillion projects, that across the board, and so you can have things that are very niche to something that's very accessible. Let me take a minute here to pay some bills, and then we'll kind of get back to your prosecution if you still have something to say.
Just wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay. So David Lynch, if he had it at the time, should have used Grammarly to help him with this script. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Download Grammarly today. Go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. It's funny, Dave. I think I said in the chat, I think it was maybe Spectre, something that Robert and I reviewed a few years ago, and that just got re-released within the past week or so because it's fresh in my memory. And I was like, and I said something, and I was like, yeah, you couldn't make Dune now.
Whoops.
Yeah.
On the bright side, you got a 2-for-1 on bringing that one back.
Yeah. But
Topical.
I think the point that this was, again, so much has changed in just a 3-year period. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, anything else about this movie that you find fault with?
Just overall, I'd say it fails in that it has, it changes some details of the original book that sort of make it a bit less, though I'll get into a bit on why in a minute here. And it's overstuffed. It's bogged down by exposition, over explaining character motivations that could have been better expressed through acting and the situations. And just sort of general Lynchian weirdness, with all respect to David Lynch.
He felt very much like slave to the source material, which is never a good start in an adaptation. We often comment, so much of our conversations, both privately and I think just as a general national conversation that we have about the arts, is how frustrated people get that an adaptation is not enough like the source material. It's really aggravating for people, but that's not how adaptation works. We talked about, just as an example, maybe an example that makes sense to a lot of people, like you can't do the actual demon in a bottle Iron Man story for a mass audience. You're going to lose the kids that way if you're doing a whole movie about a drunk. You can't do Iron Man leaves Las Vegas. Well, but what you can do is give him a terminal illness and have him struggle with his own mortality after just conquering death. He comes away from the first movie and he's like, I figured out how to not die. And the thing that's not killing him is killing him. So it's like, I can't win for losing. And then he starts to sort of unravel mentally. And it isn't until he figures out the puzzle box that his father left for him that he's able to process through these things. And so that's their best interpretation of demon in a bottle for a mass audience. And as I tell people, years ago, this is another reference to an old podcast, we reviewed Days of Future Past. And they were talking, and the Sentinels appear in the first 10 minutes of the movie. And somebody, good friend of the podcast, was screaming and yelling about how those are Nimrods, not Sentinels. There's a difference. And it's like, who fucking cares? Nobody who saw that movie except you. They felt the need to use them in that way for a specific purpose. That's the point of the story, not, that it has to draw directly from the Days of Future Past comic that was all 2 issues long. So, and that kind of goes into my sort of defense of Dune. Oddly enough, I think, in fairness to David Lynch, and this is more like a defense of his mindset, I think, than it is the practice of making the movie. I feel like he really wanted to honor the source material. I think that somewhat to the movie's discredit, I guess, he wanted to make sure Herbert Walker's
Frank Herbert.
Sorry, Frank Herbert. Sorry, oof. Frank Herbert. I'm tired. It's been a long weekend. Frank Herbert's words made it to the screen that, it was something the author feels was representative of what he was trying to get at. Doesn't quite work as successfully as it should, but I give the man credit for trying. I'm also going to, despite the fact that it lost my pea brain, and I was struggling with it, I can appreciate the fact that they created. It does absolutely feel otherworldly. There is some science fiction that looks like it was absolutely shot on a Hollywood set. Like, you don't feel like you're taken away at all. And it's just like, like almost like kids playing in a bedroom. Like, all right, like, fine. You shot this thing for $10. Got it. This doesn't feel. This feels like it earned every single one of the dollars that was spent on it.
Like visually, it's very unique. Like I don't think there's many other films that look like this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, to David Lynch's credit, I think he definitely, science fiction, especially in the 70s and 80s, you are absolutely trying to just not even then, just really good science fiction. So like Avatar, and I'm not making a comment on how good Avatar is, but Avatar created a place that people wanted to live in. People wanted to live in Pandora. Like I think there were like some incidences of suicide because people like didn't want to leave Pandora and they just wanted to be there, and they could not handle the real world. Obviously, that speaks to other issues in our society, but I digress.
Yeah, you guys do realize that the atmosphere is poisonous, right? And like 90% of the flora and fauna want to kill you. Like, but it's pretty.
It sure is. Anyway, like the success of the achievement of Avatar was how otherworldly and real and tangible Pandora felt. And that is, I think, the biggest strength of Dune is that this feels like a place that feels like a very lived in, very otherworldly universe that one could get lost in. You said in your prosecution that the biggest problem with it is how dense it all is, and it's a little hard to follow because of that. Like, not making any jokes, it is hard to keep track of who's on what side, and it feels almost Lucasy in that sense, where like Lucas wrote, if you've ever seen the original treatment, and we talked about this a little bit on source material because it was adapted into a comic. Lucas's original treatment for Star Wars is like 1 billion pages long, and it starts with some stuff that was covered in the prequels, and and he looked at this giant ass, again, that's why I always think about Brian and Family Guy. He looked at this giant ass screenplay that he wrote was 1 zillion pages long. It was like, okay, well, this isn't going to work. Let me just make this part. So I kid about Lucas starting with episode 4, but he really did kind of just start in the middle of the story that he was telling. Yeah. The original story. And so that is kind of how you feel with Dune. You're just dropped in the middle of this thing. And David Lynch cares enough about the audience to be like, let me explain while the present movie is taking place, let me try to catch you up. It's a different style than how Lord of the Rings kind of handled things, which was, let's start at the very beginning. First, there was lava.
Yeah. Well, Lord of the Rings has the advantage of, by doing things from the Hobbit's point of view, they are being introduced to the world as we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point. There's no really good point of view character in this. Paul kind of gets what's happening, and so instead of sort of explaining it to the audience because they have to explain it to Paul, Paul's already involved in doing things, and so instead, as you said, you just get kind of the mind reader's approach to the exposition, which does not work at all.
Yeah, like they usually they have it start off with Paul in a lesson with like Twofer, I think, like teaching him and sort of reviewing, the different houses, Atreides, Harkonnen, and like the Corino, which is the Emperor's house, to sort of give you that sort of geopolitics 101 here. But that is, you're not going to be able to cover everything you need to know, like the Bene Gesserit and the Spacing Guild, the Fremen as well. Like there's a lot of factions at play and with a lot of motivations. Some are simple, some are hard. Like the Harkonnen are easy to explain. They're evil bastards. But whereas like the Bene Gesserit, who they are, what they can do, what their plans are, that's a lot more depth you have to go into.
Last thing I'm going to say about this, and credit to the actors involved. I think everybody has their best foot forward in this. I think the performances are very strong. I don't know how David Lynch is with his actors. What we know David Lynch for is his wacky, aesthetic and plots and whatnot.
Yeah, I know Kyle MacLachlan was in Twin Peaks, so I'm pretty sure he has a good working relationship with David Lynch.
Well, there were some directors who they don't direct their actors. I think we were talking about John Carpenter in Halloween when I said it doesn't feel like he did second takes with anybody. It's like whatever they give me is fine. Here, I do feel like whether or not he got second or third takes from anybody, or he was really like giving actors motivation and real direction, or was it just a lot of blocking? Run from the monster this way, run to the monster that way.
Yeah, they tried to take the life of your son.
I do feel like it's a very strong cast, and Ewan McGregor famously said about acting in the Phantom Menace, like I didn't know what the hell. I think even Alec McGuinness has said the same thing. Oddly enough, ironically, they both Obi-Wan Kenobis in their different situations were like, I don't know what's happening in this movie. I think
Alec Guinness was more just he's not used to that type of science fiction, whereas Ewan McGregor was like the green screen.
Right. So in the case of Alec McGuinness, he's just reading his lines like, this is gobbledygook, but I'll say whatever you're paying me, so I'll say whatever.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Make it sound.
And then there's Ewan McGregor, who's like, run this way against the green screen, run that way against the green screen. And like, I don't know what this is gonna look like. I don't know what I'm doing. And it was hard to act that way.
Yeah, pretend this tennis ball on a stick is trying to kill you.
Yeah. I don't get that sense is the point. I don't feel like anybody in this didn't know where they were in the scene, which happens sometimes. Like, and I've heard stories about like the Hobbit trilogy and some of the other ones where I was watching a documentary about the Hobbit trilogy, and they were doing like one of the battles of the five armies. It was a second unit direction under, I think, Andy Serkis, and somebody was talking about like, yeah, he just said fight. No one knew why. No one knew what was happening. I knew I was an orc and that's a dwarf and we're fighting each other. And that's about as much direction as we got. And so it was just like, okay, smash sticks together. Okie dokie. There's none of that in Dune. I think that's my strongest like defense of this movie is everyone in every scene. To me, it feels like they know what they're doing. They know what their motivations are. They know what the words on the paper mean that they're saying. And everyone, I think, gives a really strong performance. And I got a kick all these years later because, this is 1984. What year does TNG debut? Was it 89?
Something like that. Yeah, it was like early 90s, I think.
And so maybe you know Patrick Stewart from TNG, but most people, I think, know him as Professor X.
Nowadays, probably. But yeah, during our generation, it would have been Captain Picard.
Sure. And he's so young. That 5-year difference does make a tremendous amount. He's so young in this. Like, I got a kick out of seeing Patrick Stewart in this. Just like in this not lead role, in this supporting role. That was fun. So that's it. I think my only thing about Dune is I think if you're any kind of a science fiction person, this is sort of a rite of passage. I think you have to sit through Dune at least once. Yeah.
Well, Dune, the book, is considered one of the great classics of science fiction. Like probably Foundation and Dune, those are sort of like the big two of early science fiction novels.
You brought it up, and I don't know if you have Apple Plus in Canada.
I do.
Are you going to watch Foundation?
I have been keeping up. I haven't watched the most recent episode, but
okay, so you are watching it then.
Yes. If you want to talk Foundation sometime, I'm happy to hop on that with you.
Yeah,
it is kind of funny. Like this month, we get like two of the greatest classics in sci-fi literature adapted into films and TV shows.
We got them because of streaming, in part. I'm up for Foundation. It's on my list of things to watch. I'll just have to figure out when. In this massive schedule that is where I was cutting back, and it's completely full up again.
I mean, I've seen like the first 4 episodes now, and I'd say the jury's still out for me, but we'll see. All right, it's not too far gone.
I'll do a little research. I'll look at my calendar, and we'll figure out a date for Foundation.
And like for me, like I've read the first Foundation book. Again, I think I was in junior high at the time, so I am very curious to see how someone who is not familiar with the original work reacts to it. That could be a very interesting discussion.
It generally is, especially because like a lot of the classics I have not read. I read a little bit of Heinlein and a little bit of Asimov growing up, but not a lot, not as much as I should, because books are for burning. So but I'm into all of these adaptations that have come out of it. So yeah, we'll do that. Hey,
yeah. So Loki.
So only I get to do that.
Hey, it's my bit, man.
And I stole it. Let me ask you a question. So the music was done by Toto in this. What did you think of the music?
This
is a setup for a plug. So
I know. Yeah. I actually quite like the music. Like the main theme of Dune, I thought was quite well done. And yeah, like it would be great if there was like a place where I could listen to it easily.
Well, you can not only listen to the soundtrack from Dune by Toto, but any Toto album that's out there is available on Amazon Music, and it just so happens that we're giving away a free 30-day trial of the Amazon Unlimited service. If you click the link in the description of this podcast, it's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network to get your free trial. You fill out the information from the link. It'll take you to where you need to go. You fill it all out. You agree to the 30 days. And that 30 days is up after you've streamed all the Toto there is to stream and whatever else you want to listen to. You can cancel if you want, or you can keep it, and it's a nominal monthly fee. It's competitive with Spotify and Apple Music. In a lot of ways, it's better. From what people tell me, you can enable your household devices that I won't say the name of because one of mine will go off if I do, to play all the music that you want to play using the Amazon Unlimited Music service. So I use it on our most recent Metal Hammer of Doom, where we reviewed the new Monster Magnet covers album. Cooper, can you believe this, David? Robert Cooper, the Metal Coop, had never heard any Monster Magnet before, and so we used Amazon. He didn't. I know. So we used Amazon Music to play the best of Monster Magnet before we got into A Better Dystopia. So that was fun. Anything else before we wrap?
Yeah. So cards on the table. I was really on the fence on prosecuting or defending this one because, like, they're actually. I do think that David Lynch's Dune is a bit unfairly maligned. Like, you sort of have to look at it like the time it was made. Like, they didn't have the effects technology to really do Dune justice. Like,
really, is that what people pick on? Because I would have thought the dense storytelling and the convoluted.
Well, I'm kind of going down a list here, but
okay.
But you know, like you look at the ornithopter scene in the David Lynch's Dune. It's just like this flying brick that just floats there. But at the same time, like, the best thing they could do to do an ornithopter would be to use stop motion animation, and it wouldn't have looked good. So I'm just like, it's not actually important that the wings flap to the story. It's just a little detail. So, I can cut them some slack for that. It's more like, for example, to show the weirding way, how that would look in practice. Like, they might have had to just do like a constant exposure trick to do like a speed blur, and that never looks good. Like, no one has ever made that effect look good. So, like, I can kind of understand how, we'll just change it to being sound weapons instead, and that can tie into why the Emperor is afraid of the Atreides.
I'm just curious, have you done much reading on, other than what you've already mentioned, Frank Herbert's, Chris Bailey, his reaction to Dune?
Not so much. The only thing I really heard is he freaked out about was the rain at the end, because that just sort of goes against the whole... like he worked very hard on the sort of natural laws of Arrakis, like the ecosystem. That was the word I was looking for. The ecosystem. So he had that all mapped out in advance before he even wrote the book. So yeah, like the whole making it rain on Arrakis, that would have killed the worms and just destroyed the whole point of the show. But yeah, So yeah, I can cut it some slack, and it is a very dense work to adapt. So I understand they would have to make some changes. Again, I think that some odd decisions were made, but yeah, like visually, it's a very unique film. Like, there's nothing quite out there else like it. So yeah, like you can just kind of appreciate it as this kind of interesting oddity in film history.
Yeah, I think
like I don't. It's not a film I hate, and I actually would say that like the worms I thought looked really good for the time.
I was gonna say the worms are like the best part. Visually speaking, the worms are like, I think, the best part.
Yeah. I even thought, like, even the still suits, whilst kind of gimpy looking, I quite like the look of them. Despite, it's not. They're supposed to be bladders instead of black leather, but yeah, like it. There were some things that I think they did get pretty close and pretty right in it, and I was happy for those elements to be carried through. But yeah, again, it just what tipped me over to the prosecution side is like I am so stoked to see Denis Villeneuve's Dune. From everything I've heard, this is like they finally got it right, because like we've never gotten a worthy adaptation of the source material, and that so from that perspective, I kind of have to go on the negative side of this film. Like we did get the Sci-Fi Channel; they did a miniseries, I think, in the late '90s, which was a lot closer to the book. I think they had a bit more time to work with, but it did suffer from being low budget. Even
Right.
I mean, it was high budget for the Sci-Fi Channel at the time.
Why are we shooting this all on Battlestar Galactica stages? Shut up.
Yeah, this was quite a few years before Battlestar Galactica, but yeah, and that did very successful for them.
Let me have that joke.
Okay, fine. Yeah, and then they even went on and they did like the next two books as well.
Okay.
Like Dune Messiah and Children of Dune were rolled together into a second movie, Children of Dune, featuring a very early James McAvoy.
So I think this isn't the end. There, short of this being and it's already successful overseas, and I think they said that even if it's not as successful in the United States as it could be had we not done the stupid day and date thing, they're saying that if it gets a massive watch on HBO Max, and or it does well financially, they'll greenlit. And I think they've already gone ahead and said we're probably going to we're more yes than no on greenlighting a sequel to this, since that was the intention. But in addition to which, I believe HBO Max is getting a streaming show, The Sisterhood. You up for that?
Yeah, based on the Bene Gesserit.
Okay.
I'm not against it. It depends a lot on like if it's good or not. Like how is the writing? What's their approach?
Well, you're gonna watch it. Is what I was asking.
I would give it a look. I mean, I think it depends on if I can access it. I don't have HBO Max, but I would be open to taking a look. I mean, well, once I start to see like a trailer or something, I'll probably be able to say a bit more.
Didn't you see the Suicide Squad? Weren't you?
I did see the Suicide Squad, but I went to see that in theaters.
Oh, okay,
because we're doing not so bad for COVID in the Lower Mainland here.
Okay, all right. So I think we can agree on probation for this.
Yeah, again, I'd say, is it a good movie? Not so much. Is it an interesting movie? Yes, it is an interesting piece of cinematic history.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think where Dune has its place is that it's one of the most visually interesting movies, in terms of execution. It is a study in what not to do or what to do in adaptations, and so I think it's an important film. It's one of those where it isn't so much like a visually like enjoyable experience as it is an experience one should go through if you appreciate science fiction and or film.
Yeah, I wouldn't steer anyone away from it. I would just sort of say like, hey, it's kind of weird and clunky, and if you've read the book, there are bits of it that will frustrate you. But yeah, it's an interesting piece of cinema history, and it's worth preserving and keeping.
Yes. All right, so that wraps up our review of Dune. Earlier today, we dropped our re-airing of the Peanuts review from 2015. And that's to coincide with the release of Ron's Gone Wrong, also this weekend, but exclusively in theaters. It was the last movie, I think, produced by 20th Century Studios. And I think the studio that's actually making it is moving from, they started out with Fox under 20th Century, and then Disney bought it. And so after Ron's Gone Wrong, they're moving to a different studio, I believe. So anyway, so that was my loose connection there to the Peanuts. We also re-aired our Long Road to Ruin for the Evil Dead trilogy. That was myself, Gavin Napier, and Sean Comer. Tuesday, we've got two things coming at you. Speaking of Gavin Napier, we've got a re-airing of our Long Road to Ruin for the Brendan Fraser Mummy trilogy. And then in the evening, we'll have myself, Benjamin J. Colon, Robert Winfrey, and Jason Teasley. Jason, you just got one more mention than Chris Bailey. For Halloween Kills. And finally, we're done with the Halloween movies for this year. Thank freaking God.
I am so happy there's actually a movie coming out in October for once that I want to see.
Wednesday, sometime in the afternoon, we'll have our Mania of WrestleMania 8 and 9. And then in the evening, myself, Jesse Starcher, and Robert Cooper will be reviewing Ice Nine Kills the Silver Scream 2. Welcome to Horrorwood. On Thursday, myself and Pat Mullen will be looking at Leonard and Duran 1 and 2 for a 5th chapter of the Four Kings of Boxing. On Friday, we got a couple of old Metal Hammer of Dooms that we're releasing from the old BTR years. There's a new Cradle of Filth album coming out and a new Dream Theater album coming out. So to coincide with that, we're dropping our Robert Cooper, apparently on one of my hiatuses, reviewed with Sean Garmer and some other dude, the Dream Theater self-titled album. So that's going to release, as well as Cradle of Filth, Hammer of the Witches. So those re-airs will be coming at you this Friday, along with Dune, as we mentioned before. And then a week from today, we'll have our re-airings of our old Paranormal Activity reviews, and possibly, depending on if this guy comes through or not, we will be doing a alternative commentary live stream for Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson for the, I believe it's the junior lightweight, WBO junior lightweight title. This past week, speaking of Halloween, we did Halloween Resurrection, Midnight Mass, No Time to Die. We had Everyone Loves a Bad Guy on Slashers featuring Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, the aforementioned Monster Magnet, and then John Ronnie and I talked about Halloween from 1978, the one that started it all. All right, that's all for me. Eventually, you're going to get to see David Wright's Star Trek retrospective, which is now will be the last part of the trilogy that he did with myself, Robert, I think Andrew was on one. What else you got going on these days? Anything of note?
Not so much other than the Kelvin retrospective going up next month. But of course, I'll be on. I've got my tickets already booked for IMAX Dune this weekend, so I'll definitely be on for that. Oh, I am going all out. I've been waiting for this film for a long time. I hope it doesn't disappoint.
I've heard nothing but good things. It'll be you, Robert, myself, and then Jeff Sloboda from the MCU Bleeding Edge. We'll all be talking Dune a week from this Tuesday. So with that said, court is now in recess. For David Wright, I'm Mark Radulich. This has been On Trial. Be well, be safe, and behave.